I'm Dr. Malcolm. I am the owner of both Soul Ice Incorporated and RVA Street Foodies, a business that we started back in '07 as a mentoring program. It took flight as we were doing multiple festivals, and we're now not just a company, a vendor in the city, but we're also a workforce development program. Obviously, a business owner, minority business owner, CEO. At times, I'm behind the cart working with the employees. So I'm a co-worker, but I fill all the hats, fill the gap where it's needed, and make sure that my people continue to move forward. I was the beneficiary of several what they call trio programs back in the day, Upward Bound, Inroads. These were programs that were focused on developing you as a leader, pushing you towards entrepreneurship or C-suite jobs. So when I was in high school, I spent my summer Upward Bound, basically attending classes to get ahead of the next year. Graduated from there, was accepted into Inroads, which was a college preparatory program that also introduced you to Fortune 500 internships. So I was fortunate enough to intern at 2 public accounting firms and get hired by one. Richmond's a small business town. I think the first thing that you have to understand, it took me time, about 5 years before I met someone and actually broke down to me the ebb and flow of Richmond. And the key word or policy that you have to understand is that Richmond is a Dillon rule town. And if you're not familiar, the Dillon rule basically keeps each county independent, but they're united under the General Assembly. So when you're doing business here in Richmond, what's unique about it is that each county has its own procedures to incorporate or license your business in that region, which makes it difficult if you're not familiar because you could be carrying 5 sets of books if you're crossing over county lines. This was an old rule that was established in the beginnings of Virginia, still in place now, but most people that don't come here don't know that. And what's different is I think there's only 2 or 3 states that are still under Dillon rule. So you may come from a larger state and assume that the money flow is just like the state that you came from. But when you're coming into a commonwealth and to a state that has a Dillon rule, it's a whole different set of procedures there. I was fortunate enough to be here actually to see a lot of the changes that has happened. When I first moved here, Richmond is a festival town because it's a small business town. So what you find here is that a lot of the small businesses get to show themselves during these festivals. A lot of them are culturally oriented, which allows, if you're a small business, for you to cross over to different cultures with your products or services. So as a small business town, again, mentioning the Dillon rule, in order to do business here and do it effective, you want to first license in all of these cities and counties that you're actually going to do business in. We're a mobile food business, so we carry a license for each of the counties that we're moving to. Become familiar with the local chamber of commerce, as well as with the government system, or have a contact on the inside so they can interpret to you the difference between the laws as you're crossing over into each city or each county. The key is going to be tourism. I've been doing this since '07, since I came here in Richmond. And like I said, it's a festival town. What I've noticed for Black and Brown is we're not as strong on the business literacy. So uniting has been a difficult feat. So you'll find in our communities a lot of people feeling that they're locked out of events. I think the key way for us to become a part of the bigger economy is to develop a brand, to utilize organizations like NBL, maybe develop a Black Chamber of Commerce. And through that, I know there's a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. That chamber or organization can actually be the front face for all of these small businesses, which enables it to get large membership. But on the back end, what it does is it allows the large group, instead of individually applying, they're now coming through a bigger entity. And then they can divide up the pie inside of that entity how they see fit. So it makes it easier for promoters or other people who are doing business because they see one point of contact versus trying to find, a hodgepodge of businesses and pull them all together. So I think if we get behind a shield or one brand or organization, it will first allow us to unify practically on a different level by being acknowledged by government and corporate entities. The other side is tourism. You mentioned tourism. This is a tourist town. Although Richmond struggles with claiming its identity, it was the city with the biggest slave auction block outside of New Orleans. So when we from Africa were brought here by force, what you found is this was the place that we were traded as commodity. There were, I'm not sure how much you know about the slave trade, but you had 65 models of slavery across the globe. There was only one American chattel slavery. And American chattel slavery had a distinct feature to it. It took Africans out of the human category and it put us into an animal category. We were considered inventory. So when we came into this country, our struggle and battle has always been to humanize our bodies, to respect black body. And it is still to this day a struggle. A lot of us don't know the story. We don't know the economic or business model of slavery. So when we fight this fight for freedom, we're fighting with our backs to the wall, not knowing the business literacy and financial literacy in order to galvanize our resources together. So when I look at tourism, why tourism is important, specifically for us in getting our narrative out, the first step would be for us to actually create our media companies to be able to pin the story the way that we need to pin it, to highlight ourselves on a positive note and create the narrative right. Then from there, you tell your story as a business model. If you go down to Colonial Williamsburg, they're telling Colonial Williamsburg's story from their model, but they also get paid from the federal government because it is a tour itself. So when we talk about putting the narrative out for African Americans, we have to learn the business literacy as not making another company do what you wanted to do. You have to create the company. And then that company sells the narrative, and then you galvanize your businesses behind that narrative and create a tourism piece that now people could actually come and visit, and you're getting paid by the federal government as a museum. Richmond right now has turned a corner. It branded itself about a decade ago as RVA. That was a strategic and a bold move and a great move because it allowed you to take the old story, as I mentioned before with the slave auction block, and make that a historic narrative and a tourist attraction. But RVA became a brand that was attracting the young millennials. Now, those who were coming here because of the festivals, a lot of your lines of segregation started being broken down, and they didn't know the old story. So they attached to the city for the new current look that it was having, and it was a festival city. Right before COVID kind of stopped stopped the momentum, but it still is because it's a small town. The most effective business model in Richmond is festivals. So our identity, if we continue to move with festivals, it will continue to highlight the small businesses. It will allow new business owners to tie into the economy without all the heavy politics. And it allows you to bring your ideas from your head into the market on a fun and enjoyable ride. I would first say you never leave a city to find success. There's no such thing as that. Every city has its problems. And as I mentioned before, specifically for African Americans, we have an identity problem in the greater community in that we're trying to have liberation and have our bodies respected as human beings and not animals. To our personal identity, to ourselves, we have to get back to our roots and our narrative. There's an African term called Ubuntu, which means I am because you are, and you are because I am. And basically, we are a collective. So when I think about success, success is first going to start with understanding who you are, understanding your passion, understanding what you bring to the market. From there, you're able to actually build a collective or a cohort, a small tribe. And each member in that tribe needs to be doing a different skill set. So together, kind of how you see LeBron James model, you see as a collective, each person's doing a different role, and then they formulate their company, and then they feed off of that brand. So when I look at, what creates success, you don't have to leave a city. You have to understand the city. And you have to understand what your contribution is, not just to the country, but your contribution to your community and your contribution, most of all, back to your culture. So when you have that in place, you can now research how the money flows in the city. And then your goal is to bring your culture into that economy. So for us, the way we did it, our brand is Soul Ice. I'm originally from the North, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, another Commonwealth. When I moved here, at the time we had what we call water ice in Pennsylvania. It wasn't known in the South. So I brought a brand and a service to the South, but I changed the look and feel of how we did it in the North, and I brought my culture into it. So Soul Ice became the brand name that people actually knew frozen desserts for. We took our model and we created youth entrepreneurship as a workforce development because the youth weren't being seen in the economy. Most of the people in the work economy who own businesses were 30 and above. So I went into the festivals with a young crowd, young staff, and all of a sudden we brought the hype. So our invites into the economy was because we were the young face into these old organizations and old festivals. So again, if you know your culture, know the target audience that you're trying to deal with, then you can always fuse yourself into the economy by adding value to it. We created a health equity block party through our foundation, Street Foodies Foundation. I would encourage you to hit us on our website, www.rva Street Foodies. With this health equity block party, the goal is to bring healthy resources and healthy foods back to our community. We're a community right now where diabetes is killing us greater than war. A colleague of mine is a cardiologist who is treating diabetes, reversing diabetes actually, and he shared with me that close to a decade ago he was doing amputations at the age of 60 and 70 for those whose diabetes got out of control. And now within the Black and brown community has jumped to the age of 30 and 40. That's near genocide, but it's not being reported because we don't own the media lines. So the first thing I would say to the artists, you are a part of media. When you look at hip hop, the story got out because of the graffiti. The story got out because of the art. You have to see yourself as more than an artist. You have to understand your trade and understand how businesses flow in the city and position yourself that way. So when you come out, you don't want to say, I'm just an artist. You're part of media because a picture tells 1,000 words. So you're telling a story and a narrative. How do you get your art to help tell the narrative? You tie into a movement like what we're doing and into tourism. So as we go out and do our health equity block parties, we're creating a space for you to do murals so people can actually see you do your art live. But your art needs to either touch into history or it needs to tell some social need that we have. And that's how you make yourself valuable at the table. So we welcome the community because they're important. It is us and who we are. And I think they're needed in order to tell the flavor of the town.